talked a lot today about the role that SESAR has played, the solutions that have already been developed, and so on. But as we look to the future, what do you think, Tatiana, the additional needs are, the additional things that we're going to focus on if we are to genuinely create a safer, a greener, a seamlessly connected airspace? As I say, we've had people touching on elements of it, but what for you is going to be needed?
Well, we need to... We're not done yet, even with the things that we are doing right now. But for the things that for the future, if you really want to continue being the best, to be the best and continue being the best, we need to look at the new technologies that are coming out. One of the examples is quantum computing. We also need to look at better at the climate impact. We need to understand better how the weather of our planet works and how the emissions impact, aviation emissions impact our life. If we want to do that, we need to do a lot on that. We also have drones and other vehicles. We also have a lot of new space operations. We need to know how all of these things need to work together in a very, very complex system. If we want to continue being safe, we need to continue researching that and then introducing these things bit by bit, because you cannot really break the complex system to make it better. You need to do it slowly, unless you want it to be safe.
So some key areas there, and also throw into the mix, there was a question this morning which I held back for this conversation about artificial intelligence and whether it could have the same exponential impact on ATM as it's having in some other sectors. We'll come back to that, very much linked to that quantum computing issue as well. But let's continue to build the picture of the additional needs. Simon, for you, we know where we're focusing now. More of the same, or are there new things that you think we need to explore?
A bit of both. More of the same, definitely. I think more of the same sort of translates into deploying quicker and on a larger scale. Deployment, we've heard it all day today about we need to deploy, we need to deploy. That absolutely has to be a focus. Going forward, I think I'll lift it out of technology and future solutions into a bit more of a, not philosophical, but ATM. ATM often gets lost in conversations. We talk about airlines, they're visible. We talk about airports, they're very visible. And we still have this invisible infrastructure that sits behind it that everybody in this room is involved with. It's extraordinarily complex. We've already heard that the MFF is of a certain size. Well, actually, ATM is really important. You can invest and do all sorts of things with other parts of the aviation industry. If we don't make sure that ATM is important and known and seen as important to the future, we're going to lag behind. If we lag behind, the whole aviation industry lags behind. And I think that's a massively important focus for the future to ensure that we can still do all the stuff that we're going to do. So that's more of a lifting out of the technology side. I think focus areas for me, aside from that, would definitely be integration. Integration of any aircraft requiring any services, and I still don't think we know what those services are yet. So I think that's a massive thing. It was mentioned this morning, it was mentioned again very briefly this afternoon, sustainability. It's in our interest for aviation as an industry to be sustainable, and I still think we need to do more to make sure that's possible. Because if it's not sustainable, it will not happen. It will cease to exist, and therefore we will cease to exist. So I think it's in our own interest. So they're some of the key priorities that I think we should spend more time and more effort on. And the last one is a process one, and we need to get stuff in faster. So the timescale from innovation, through R&I into deployment needs to be at least 1/10 of the timescale probably that it is today, in order to be able to meet the demands that are on us as an industry. Unless we can do that, we'll be having the same conversation year in, year out.
Indeed, and that speed being of the essence, absolutely central to all our discussions today. Tina, from your point of view, in terms of areas of focus, we're hearing more work in some areas, new areas of work like quantum computing, for example. For you, what are the key areas we need to focus on?
So for me, there's one vital realization we all have to take, hopefully today, before we go home. When we speak about innovation, by definition, this is bringing new things into the market so that there are commercial benefits created. This is deployment. Innovation is deployment. Otherwise, you're talking about inventions or coming up with technology trials. So we need to bring this deployment way sooner into how we consider the programs and the course of development. And when we do that, I think it's high time to welcome adjacent industries. Quantum computing, that's not an aerospace discipline. Neither are sensors, neither is cybersecurity. We can lean into other adjacent fields when we decide to trust them, all the way up through certification. There's been this mandate from an aviation safety agency that now also ground-based systems need to go through a certain sort of certification. Okay, fine. What problem are we solving? I think we owe it to ourselves also to be diligent and challenge the certain field when we are not doing something that truly stands a chance of solving problems. And the second large field is education. 2045. This means that the chief engineers of that era are today in kindergarten. Yeah? So we have to equip that generation with expectations and knowledge as to what needs to come up there for the common good. And that's not trivial. Yeah? So we can all be smart about being quick and prolific, but there's a whole generation behind us that needs to be equipped for this journey.
Thank you very much. Lots to come back on. Carl, would you add any elements to those areas that require further work or underline some in particular?
I will not add any technologies because I agree with you. If I look into the master plan, all the technologies that I can think of are addressed in there. If you look into the development priorities, the 12 that we can read in the master plan, these are the right technologies from my point of view. I agree with my colleagues here on the panel. It's probably more about the methodology, how to bring this technology into operation, because that must be the final goal for everything we are doing. Yes, we are not doing research for research's sake. We're doing it for bringing something into deployment eventually. And I think that we can learn from other industries. I have been very active in the public safety industry for the last 10 years. And a lot of the concepts I heard today, I heard 10 years ago from public safety. Yeah? And other industries have started even 20 years ago with things like service orientation, data centers. Cloud technology has been around for more than 10 years now. So if I could wish for one thing, it would not be another technology that we bring into the mix, but to learn more from other industries and bring that into the ATM domain.
And just to follow up on that, what do you think, what are industries would you be looking at in particular, and what do you think we can learn?
I would look in particular into other safety-related or safety-critical industries. I mentioned public safety before. It's not so highly regulated compared to ATM, but it's safety-critical nevertheless. If you place an emergency call, you expect that you will be connected to an operator. So these things need resilience, these things need redundancy, these things need low latency response times. So there's lots of commonalities in the requirements. And I guess what we can especially learn from there is how they bring new technology into operation, how they are using automated testing, for instance, how they are using delta updates of small microservices to bring that into an existing system so that you have an evergreen ecosystem that's evolving over time without sacrificing any safety requirements. That's, I think, anyhow a given here. Yeah.
Just interested if anybody else has any thoughts on that in terms of working with, looking at those other industries. We had Sean White from the European Defence Agency earlier talking about the importance of civil and military going hand in hand and dual-use technologies. Simon, you wanted to come in?
I think I've been in the industry too long. I'm a bit of a cynic as far as this is concerned. We talked about industries before, the banking industry. That was the first industry we used to compare ourselves to. You know, lots of millions of transactions that always happened without failure. That's what we should be going after. Then there's the mobile phone industry, where we move from infrastructure-based to service-based. And we're still looking at the mobile phone industry and still not really learning from it. for whatever reason, our culture within ATM, I think, thinks we're slightly unique, and therefore we need to do things ourselves. I completely agree. I think there are many industries and many things that we could learn from. We just don't appear to be able to do that effectively. And that's something we really should concentrate on. I don't know how to do it. We've been trying it for 20 years and not yet succeeded.
So you don't know whether it's you're looking at the wrong sectors, comparing yourself with the wrong sectors, or not asking the right questions. Is this a question, Tatiana, that you and the scientific committee ask themselves? Do you?
Oh yes, I think it's always, as Simon said, when I hear them, it seems a lot of a fad of the moment. Now, I mentioned quantum computing. I don't think it's the thing for the ATM, but I think if quantum computing comes up, for example, we will need to know how to use it. And that's the point that we need to do. We have so many of these technologies around ourselves, and we need to know how to use them to the best of our interest to make our ATM better. And also, to be able to do that, and we also need to, as Tina said, we need to educate the next generation of people working in the ATM. We're losing the best engineers. They're going to all the other sexier things that could be banking, could be finance, and sexier in terms of money.
Yeah. I was going to say, okay, yeah, because I was going to say, okay, how do you make ATM research and innovation sexy in that case?
Well, once upon a time, it was very, very sexy in that sense, and now with it's getting less and less because it's one of the regulated industry that you get. People are getting paid less and less compared to these other industries. Right. Not saying that they are. Not saying that we are becoming poor person in the room, but compared to these industries that can offer much higher salaries and right. Education is more or less there. It's more or less the same. If you have the engineer in transportation and the engineer in electrical things, half of the program is the same. Then you have another half that does other things.
Tina, just before we move on, a thought to this question of learning from other industries. Are we missing a trick here?
Trust is the trick. Right? Aviation keeps convincing ourselves that only if the idea gets created or gets embodied from the ground up in the cluster of aviation, it's good enough. This is the fundamental.
Okay, so it's a mindset change we need.
Absolutely.
More than anything else. An intriguing question. So I asked you which technologies, what areas should we be focusing on? But someone in the audience says, what should we stop? If we translate the statement that Philippe Cornelis made earlier, that research into the improvement of diesel engine was the wrong focus. So he said, we spent a lot of time trying to make the diesel engine better and better and better by a tiny percentage, and everyone else was doing electric. The question here is there one of those, an example of that, do you think, in ATM? So is there something we should stop doing? Tatiana?
I think there's something that we should finish, because they're there.
Yeah.
We have them ready, there's just not a will to actually do the final step and put them out in the market, which I don't know why.
I'd like to second that. Yeah. How is the saying? Stop starting, start finishing. I fully agree. Yeah, and this goes also hand in hand, I think, with the motivation for young engineers to join the ATM domain. Money, of course, is one aspect, but the other aspect is you would like to see your invention or your creation in live operation. You would like to see it create value for real people. Yeah? This is a strong motivator from my experience for young engineers joining a company in the ATM domain or in general going into that direction. And if we focus on finishing running initiatives and bringing them into the field, then I think we will close that feedback loop that's so important. And we anyhow have discussed over the day that the current feedback loops are way too long, so we need to shorten them, we need to get faster.
Tina and then Simon.
So I think we have to do two things. We're not doing ourselves a favor continuing to carry on with the prescriptive limitations when it comes to ATM capacity, like separations in nice round figures, 5 miles, 3 miles, 1 mile. We know they work. We have no idea if there's marginal opportunity because we haven't deployed that. We are powered by fear. And the younger generation, if you tell them, look, there's some intrinsic parameters or limit there, they will ask you, why? Do we know? Like, can we answer it to ourselves, or can we just say, it's always been like that? And that's a dangerous answer, because it precludes taking the next step into whichever direction. And the other point is long timelines. How sexy it is for a high school student to decide on their career if their personal win, will be recognized in 2045. I don't know, you tell me. Not even the bank gets excited, let alone the youngsters.
Simon.
This industry, I think, has always found it difficult to know what to stop. For all of us that have been involved in the industry for many, many years, you start things off and you look back 10 years later and they still exist, and they're still being talked about and they're still being reiterated. There are some good reasons for that. You know, when you implement something, it's about constant improvement. It's about continuously improving either safety or efficiency or performance or simply maintenance, actually. So it's a difficult thing to stop things, especially as our industry is still remarkably complex. We are still using stuff that's 50, 40, 30, 20, 10 years old, whilst trying to implement stuff that's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years hence, and you can't ever turn it off. So you can't just turn things off, you have to replace things. So doing both at the same time is really hard to do. If I was going to say one thing that we should slow down on, I think we should really slow down on looking at old infrastructure and starting to get rid of that and look at data services and services and data, or providing services using data from other sources rather than continuously investing in our own. But again, that's really difficult. A lot of the people in this room, that's how they get return on their investments, by long-term investments that have still got 20 years left to payback. So again, it's slowing down, but really stopping and turning off is really hard.
Okay. I want to come back on quantum computing in a moment and artificial intelligence, but Simon, just to tell you, this isn't a question, this is from somebody in the audience, from Ericsson, saying, learning from the phone industry, part of that industry is in the room and we're open to discussions within SESAR.
Perfect.
So the other industries are here. You can, if you feel frustrated by that conversation, start it again. Let me come to, I want to ask how much of a difference quantum computing could make, and link this to a question in the panel this morning, which I didn't take then because I thought it was more appropriate this afternoon. The questioner then said, we've seen the potential of artificial intelligence and how it's transforming other industries, not just by, there was a debate this morning about whether 6% was ambitious enough in terms of emission reduction and so on, but saying, but 10 times more. Do you believe AI could have the same exponential impact in ATM? And if it could, where does the research need to focus to make best use of these tools?
That's $1 million question, which is because we still don't know where we could make it the best. And as we say, the ATM is highly regulated industry. We are very safety and security-like, and the AI is still not very, or at least these big things that we hear about in other industries, large language models. Every time you ask them, you get a slightly different questions, which is not something that we can work with in the ATM. It has to be almost always the same answer, right? So we're still looking at, it could bring a lot of benefits in some parts of ATM, I feel, but we also have to find a way, we're still trying to look with the EASA, is trying to find a way of how we could certify AI to be able to be there for the safe use in the ATM. So that's on the AI. On the quantum computing, we are still even further away because it's still, even in other industries, it's still being just researched on how it's going to be used. But if it becomes a viable solution, like what we've seen with the advent of the PCs, it's going to be a complete game changer, and we should be ready for that if it comes. If it doesn't come, we will continue what we were.
The difficulty at the moment is identifying where your focus might need to be to realize the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the quantum computing, it's more on cybersecurity. If we go back to the data services and everything, if the quantum computing becomes there, we are not ready for the cryptography, the quantum cryptography. Everything we do now can be intercepted. Security goes to the basement. So these are the things we need to look into. We need to be ready for them. It's not a given that we shouldn't be developing these technologies. We should be learning how to use them in our area.
Other thoughts to this, Carl?
Yeah, I think it depends on the time horizon. So if we are targeting 2045, I would say there's so much to leverage based on traditional automation. I would predict that artificial intelligence will play a role, but maybe not a dominant role. The same for quantum. Yeah? For both, I see really them changing many industries. But my feeling is, and I might be totally wrong here, it's just the feeling, that this will kick in the second half of the century. That's, if you ask me for a prediction, that would be mine.
Did you want to come in on that? There was a specific question to you, Tine, about you, of course, developing electric aircraft. Someone wants to know, what changes in airspace management do you expect to be ready for the first all-electric commuter flights? I mean, in this area more generally, when it comes to ATM, where do you think the focus of future research needs to be?
I think it's not so much tied to the fact that an aircraft would need to be electric for this purpose. But my mind definitely goes towards activating airfields, small airports, that are today not considered locations for commercial air transport, like regular shuttles, if you wish, that stand the chance to be activated with remote towers and other bits and pieces, but most of all, single pilot operations and contingency management that comes with that. And this starts to be quite an interesting set of problems. There are some ongoing projects, quite exciting on this nature. It's kind of the sum of all fears. Right? So if you look at regular airline operations, there's two heroes in the cockpit. They get served the weight and balance, the whole manifest. A team of mechanics checks up their aeroplanes. There's a whole planning team behind them, and they go. And they make mistakes as well. The predominant human factor, the predominant reason of accidents today is human factor. It's not component failure or systems failing to behave like they should, thanks to all the redundancies and every investment that was going in that direction in the past decades. And now you are all of a sudden faced with a situation where there's commercial viability of such operation with quiet electric aeroplanes from small airports that does not compute anymore with two guys in the cockpit. Okay. Or the whole machinery in the background. So how much of this can we stand to activate or automate?
Just wanted to run through a few of those other areas that you mentioned. Simon, you talked about integration as a key area for further work. What further research do we need?
Well, there's a couple of things that's already happened. Outside of Europe and globally, there's something called CATS, Complete Air Traffic System Global Council. And they've developed a vision for 2045. And now we're just about to soft launch the agreed global CONOPS, which includes all of these things that we're talking about, the steps that are needed to be taken in order to be able to get to the agreed CONOPS at the end. And I'm pleased to say it's all aligned with the SESAR ATM master plan. It's completely coordinated, and SESAR is a part of that global community, which consists of it's not driven by ATM. It's airlines, it's manufacturers, it's service providers, it's ICAO, it's regulators, it's SESARs of the world. Or actually, SESAR is pretty unique, but maybe that's another question. It's all joined up, and lots of these steps are in there for integration, what we need to focus on. The first thing I think is we need to be very different. I think it's about sharing data. Again, it comes back to sharing information and sharing data, and using it in a way that we probably never used it before. And what I mean by that is there's something, and there's better people than me in the audience that know more about this than me, but we talked about, you mentioned separation 1, 5, 3. It doesn't need to be that. It can be dynamic. It can be very different depending on what aircraft types are being, or airborne vehicles are being separated. As an example, most people in this room, including myself, think, whoa, that's not very consistent. But actually, it could be consistent. It's about thinking about it in a very different way, and then being brave enough and finding a place to do that safely. Society is not accepting of danger anymore. I think when aviation first started, people unfortunately, suffered as a result of that. We are no longer a society that accepts that type of innovation, that type of drive and that change. So we have to work out how to do all of that in a safe environment. And I'm not sure we've got that quite right yet.
Thank you. And Tatiana, 2 other areas you mentioned where there is a lot of work already being done: climate, impact, and drones and other vehicles. Where do you see, you mentioned them though as areas for future work. Where are the gaps that still you think will need to be filled with future projects?
Well, on the climate, there is a lot of work being done. I think it is mostly, again, on the part of the atmospheric scientists, on the physical modelers, for them to explain to us in the ATM what all of this research, what they are working on, what it means, what the results of these models mean, because we don't know that. Us ATM experts or air transport engineers, we never did so much physics as they did. So we need to find a way of, it's not to get things lost in translation, because that's what often happens if the things are complex enough from one area to another. And then also on the drones, there is actually a lot of, where we get the biggest gaps is always in trying to get them integrated in the regular ATM, and my personal feeling that it's still far away to this big integration of like having a vision like all these different drones, little flitters, big ones, all flying in the same airspace with the regular aviation and the space operations. Still, I think there's still a lot of unknowns especially from the safety point of view to make it that integrated. But that's personal.
Any other thoughts on that, in terms of that complexity of the system that we have?
It's complicated.
Thanks, Simon.
I know. Anything helpful, just let me know. But what I mean by that is, I think before we get to integrated, we will do segregated. I think there's a step to go through. And we're not even at the segregated stage just yet. So ultimately, it has to be integrated for the we got complexity problem, we got a capacity problem, and with those two joining together, it can only be done by integrated. But we're not there yet. So I think we go through a segregation phase. That's where we can prove some of these concepts, and we can prove some of these separation standards or services that we don't do yet or not being done yet. And then we can integrate. But we have to go through that phase first.
2 other issues that were mentioned at the beginning when I was asking about areas of focus. Sensors. I think, Tina, was it you who mentioned sensors? Or was it? Yes. What sort of work do we need? Where should the focus be?
So I have quite a strong opinion on that,
Good.
Unfortunately. I'd want to get rid of them. Like, I can't see the future of aviation, manned or unmanned, where we equip these flying vehicles with the equivalent of an early missile warning system, each. I don't think that's sustainable. I think the concept of connectivity and sharing information between aircraft and from the ground to the aircraft is the way to go. So if you navigate a city, you pull up your phone, you are connected to something, and that something tells you left or right. You do not have lasers shooting out of your eyes, trying to figure out trying to figure out your surroundings, and then somehow miraculously, thanks to not yet developed AI, you make a decision, my croissants must be towards the left. So humanity has grown up on the principle of sharing knowledge and experience for the bad and the good. So I think sensors, where they make sense, but when I speak sensors, is the ones that we do not yet carry on the aircraft and actually stand a chance of enhancing safety, which includes mid-air collisions. We are at a time where we see that even manned aircraft are not immune to that.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic to see that the program that started discussing detect and avoid for drones can actually make serious benefits also across the aviation domain. But I don't think the sensors are the answer. I think it's sharing of this data and making sure that data is truthful, right? So if you have a fake map,
come back
you won't
on that.
find your croissants.
Absolutely. Carl, I saw you nodding emphatically while Tina was talking there about sensors. You agree fully? Any nuance to that?
Fully agreed. I think what we need to support is those dynamic networks or ad hoc networks that allow data sharing within security and safety constraints. I think it's not the way to go to put all of those sensors into the airplanes and then expect that one airplane will give you sufficient information to make all the decisions for that airplane. It must be a dynamic network that relies on resilient mechanisms, and then the data sharing can happen in that network in the air and on the ground. And I think that's where lots of investments in research go into, and that's the right decision from my point of view.
Getting some questions about the future of SESAR and so on, but one of the elements when you talk about working collaboratively is the question of competitiveness. And someone's saying, when sharing data in the aviation sector, how will we overcome the fear of losing competitiveness? Well, SESAR has managed to get this sharing, this working together in a collaborative way, and overcome perhaps some of those concerns. Do you think that is a bigger concern for the future? Or is it more, when we talk about data sharing, about that trust in the security of the data, in the quality of the data? What are the issues, Tatiana?
Well, we do collaborate a lot. It's good in SESAR. Aviation, there are some information that are mandated by regulations that are available publicly, but we should share more. Because like this, whoever keeps the data, and there's a lot of times it's always a competitive advantage, business confidentiality, this and that, but we're losing out. And we're losing out because we cannot see what are the problems that these data owners have, and what are the solutions that the new students, new generation can offer, because I really do hope that some of my students are going to be 100 times better than what we ever thought about. They have great ideas, but if you do not have on what to train them, they're just going to go to another industry where they have this type of opportunities. So we need to be better at that.
And Simon, what do you think, if we aren't as good as we could be, what's holding us back? Is it the lack of trust? Is it fears about competitiveness? What is the problem?
All of that. I think two things. One is, it's one of the key benefits of SESAR to be able to share. People feel as though they can share information within that environment, and I think that's a massive positive. And it is pretty unique around the world. So congratulations for that. I have a belief mechanism that, and there's some people. Well, I've said this before. All data should be freely available. It's what you do with the data. It's the value that you add to the data. That's the commercial competitiveness that you can create as any company, as anything, is what you do with that. But the data itself holds no value. But there's a belief within, there's a culture within ATM often, because it's grown up with individual, country-bordered, creating your own infrastructure, your own information that you own and you have, that actually it's got a value. Well, it hasn't really got a value, only to yourself. But if everybody shared that information freely, then people could add value to it. And that's where we need to get to. Once we've got that seamless border of data information sharing, we've cracked it.
There's a question that really links to what you just said about someone saying earlier, the ATM sector has difficulties to learn from best practices internally and implement what is invented in another ANSP. How can we improve it? Sounds to me like that is part of the equation. Anything else we need to do? And then I'd like to come on to what all of this means for the future of the joint undertaking, because we're getting a lot of questions about that. But Simon, anything else that needs to be done?
I think we try and do it. We do it quite a lot. I don't think we share best practices. I think we can do that. I think it comes down to, a lot of it comes down to consistency of regulation. So in some areas of the world, regulation is very different to other areas of the world. So the learning you know, the regulators won't recognise the fact that it's been implemented in another country, in another part of the world. You have to start again and do it all again. So it's a continuous process of reinventing the wheel. We've got to get better at that. So standardisation globally, and I think it was what Arndt said earlier on, that will speed up things immensely and cost a lot less money. And that's, both of those are really, really important. So it's that standardisation is absolutely key.
Thank you very much. So anyone want to add on that issue of,
I would probably add modularize. Yeah, so standardize on the one hand and modularize the systems. And I think this will help attack a little bit the not invented here syndrome.
Thank you. Lots of questions, as I say, about the future of SESAR. What do all these challenges mean for the SESAR joint undertaking and continued investment in research and innovation? Asks one questioner. Another says, Philip Cornelis spoke about the next EU budget. Will SESAR research need continued EU funding beyond the life of the current JU? If yes, what is the case for it? We talked about this a bit in earlier panels, but as you sit here and you chart the research needs of the future, I really would like you to address this, and also, if you would, the flip side of the coin, what the consequences might be. Arndt Schoenmann referred earlier to saying, if we don't, we can find ourselves in serious trouble. What would the consequences be if we do not see this funding continued and this form of collaboration, of public-private partnership, continuing? Carl, what would you say about the need for this investment and the consequences if we don't?
It was mentioned multiple times today that Europe is pretty fragmented when it comes to ATM, and I guess it will not change that quickly. So to have that body that coordinates and that puts out a vision in the form of the master plan is, I think, super critical for ATM in Europe especially. And having the vision in form of a master plan and having someone to coordinate are two important ingredients, but the third ingredient is the funding. So the funding is as critical as having the vision and having the coordination. I cannot imagine single European sky without proper funding for those initiatives.
Thank you. Tina?
So I basically see SESAR as a lighthouse with the beam of light touching every stakeholder, from developers, from the industry, from the users, from the policymakers, from the regulators, and they get their incredible beam of light showing onto them once in a while, making sure that they all understand where this movement is going. I think the light must not go out, because then you have individual pathways and sort of a bit of an anarchy when it comes to just business goals prevailing over the true the true essence of what is the right thing to do and what needs to happen. You know, the financing thing is interesting because it's driven by motivation as well. So I think we can collectively do a lot for ourselves if we amplify our ambition to 11, even if we don't believe in it. Because then with shorter time frames and quicker wins, people might actually change their minds. When we come to EASA, look, there's a push-pull situation, right? So regardless of how much we push into some direction, if there's no buy-in from the regulator, and that's a healthy mechanism, there is no deployment. So it's not a healthy situation where there is a bottleneck on either side, and I hope that the message is understood. We need EASA, but we also need EASA to be pragmatic. I know of discussions within the industry, behind the official layers, where us, the industry, are fine with contributing more funding towards EASA daily activities through fees and charges, but we expect agility, we expect cooperation, we don't expect just every possibility of something that could go wrong thrown at us initially. We need to be in all of this together. There has to be a balancing out. I'm not done yet. When it comes to timelines and motivation, because I truly believe innovation is a mindset. Yep. It comes down to whether you are motivated to do so, or that has been said many times, yes, we have to do it together, but we have a choice. Do we together wait for something to happen, or do we together get it done? And I would like to leave you with one thought that comes from an...
You're not going to leave us because we've not finished yet.
Well, you consider after I say it. It comes from an athletic coach that shall be unnamed now, but the sentence goes in this direction. You encourage what you tolerate. So if we tolerate long timelines, we encourage them. If we tolerate complexity, we encourage it. If we tolerate this situation as we are in, we encourage it. So what do we want to tolerate in 2025? That's the question.
Thank you very much indeed. And that was fine. I don't want to throw you off the panel. Simon, in terms of the future of SESAR, and one thing I have seen discussion of is we need to continue it. That much is clear. It's been an argument made very strongly throughout the day. Some suggestion that maybe we need to look, and this is really this panel talking about a better alignment of the work with emerging needs. Do you think anything needs to change in order to be able to really adapt all the time and align with those emerging needs?
That's a tricky one.
Maybe I should, I mean, if you want to think about it for a minute.
No, I
the
think
scientific committee, I imagine, do this all the time, so I'll come
I've never been on a panel talking about quantum calculators or lasers coming out your eyes before. So
there you are.
This is a first. You're right. So I agree with everything that's been said today. SESAR, I believe, does need to continue. That's important. I think, using another phrase, if you do what you did, you're going to get what you got. And that's probably that's no longer acceptable. So I think, if anything, with SESAR, and it's not SESAR, I mean, we talk about SESAR, it's actually everybody, SESAR is not one single thing, it's a whole community, massive community. And so the whole community needs to be held to account with SESAR to say, actually, we need to change. We need to be more agile, we need to be more innovative. And I get really uncomfortable talking about money all the time. We need more money, we need more money. That's an input. What outputs are we looking for? So what do we need to achieve? What are we trying to get as an outcome? And it comes back to my very first comment to say ATM is massively important, and yet I'm not sure it gets talked about as being as important as it is to the aviation community. That's not me feeling all special. I mean, if ATM didn't exist, aviation across Europe and the world would be...
But interesting that the Draghi report on competitiveness, a huge, very important report, did highlight ATM as a key area for competitiveness. So I link that to what Philippe said about you've got to link it to the agenda of today. So its contribution to competitiveness, to resilience, to all these issues. Is that the key?
It is part of the key, yes. But that's not normal. That's a relatively... You don't see that very often, let's put it that way. And I think that's one place, one conversation, one report. How do we elevate that? So it comes back to, it's not about, I want a billion euros, or I want X amount of euros. It's about, this is what we need to achieve. If we don't achieve this, the impact is X. Therefore, we need to be of a significant importance within whatever funding is going to be available, rather than talking about, euros and cents going in at the top end. That gets lost in the debate, well, SESAR is really expensive. Yes, SESAR is expensive, but the consequences of not doing SESAR is massively more expensive. In terms of, before SESAR existed, every state had their own research and innovation, spending millions and millions and millions of euros and whatever currencies we were in then every year, and all developing at different speeds. At last, we're sort of trying to develop, bring everybody all together at the same speed in a cheaper way. So the consequences of not having SESAR are massively expensive. It is a complex industry. It will cost to do this, but we must focus on the outputs, not the inputs.
Thank you. Tatiana, to this point about the continuation of SESAR and whether you think anything needs to change, particularly in relation to this identification of the conversation we're having now about the areas of the future, the emerging needs and the emerging opportunities from, you talked about it right at the beginning, quantum computing, AI. How do you see that process? How are you doing it at the moment within the scientific committee, and that process evolving as we move forward?
Well, I do believe we need to continue because what are the options? We have the option we stop in 27. Half of the things that we are financing right now are not going to be even halfway through. And these are the important things that are envisioned in the master plan to be the enablers of the benefits that we invested already in, right? So we already put the money in and it's going to stop there. Some of it is probably going to get brought forward without any funding because there's always somebody who really needs to scratch that itch because that's their really, really big problem, so they might be doing that. But that's coming back to what Simon said. It's going to be everybody going on their own, firing off on their own things, and aviation is a global network. If we want to make it better, we need to think about network, not of the small countries. In Slovenia, it's my ex-country as well, but Slovenia is like this big in Europe. And they, on their own, cannot make the European aviation better. They can do the best thing in Slovenia, but that if there's nobody to push that outside, we're not going to get that. Then on another hand, without that, we all go off on our own side. And also, if there is no public investment into that, I can tell you that the research goes away. The academic research. You might get the research in the manufacturers, in the NSPs, some of them who still have it. Not everybody has the research departments because money, again. If the higher institutions do not get funding from that area where they're used to, they're just going to switch to another area where you can have money. And it's not only the question of money, it's because also the higher institutions are, research institutions are also need to bring money, but it's also the opportunity to research, because if there's not there, if something like SESAR JU is not there that enables the collaboration, enables the data sharing, enables problem, puts a problem on a table saying, okay, this is a problem, can you solve it? If it's not there, then the academia is going to go away to another area, and we are going to lose that, as Tina was saying. Like those kids that are now in the kindergarten are not going to have an opportunity to work in to be educated to work in aviation, not only ATM, because it's all very linked. If you want to work in ATM, you have to know about a little bit about every single bit part of the aviation. So this is really, really important. If we want to continue having it better, we need to continue investing in it, because, I mean, let's also look at the AI or something. How many billions we're talking about in 1 year for AI? And it hasn't proven anything, and it's losing $500 million a day so far. So, and the whole SESAR is how much? $1 billion? For the 7 years, not even that, from the public money. So let's.
And that crucial role that public money plays in leveraging the private investment, the investment that companies like yours are making, and other companies that we've heard of today. What for you would be the consequence if we let that go? Carl and then Tina.
So if public funding would be stopped, it would for sure have a consequence on our research activities. Yeah. No doubt about that. We would not reduce it to zero, but it would have a severe impact on our research activities.
So the funding enables you to invest, but also it's about the collaboration, but it's also that crucial role that it plays in leveraging your own investment.
Yeah, and it's also about defining priorities. Yeah, so priorities go where money goes. Yeah, so funding can also help us set priorities and focus, and thus achieve coordination across Europe.
So going back to the master plan, that shows us that roadmap. You know where we're headed, you know where we are on that shared journey Andreas was talking about, and that helps give you the confidence in your investing. Tina, did you want to add a thought here? And then I want to try and identify some key next steps before we close.
I can definitely echo what was said. I think the boldness of research that would continue to unfold would drop. Let's face it, these schemes like SESAR are pretty much a risk-free way of trying things you otherwise wouldn't out of your own pocket. So I've also said it many times that I do not support innovation without risk through public money. It should be risky. And the other point is, a public pan-European acknowledgement of one's activity also helps raising internal funds because it's an affirmation of going into the right direction, and it links straight back to the master plan and what that right direction actually is. So it has truly a duality of value for each private entity.
Thank you very much. We are almost out of time, and it is a foolish moderator who keeps an audience from the networking reception, and I do want to have a chat with Andreas before we close. So let me just finish, and I'll start with you, Carl, and come down the line. And I want to go back, I've mentioned it several times today, that quote that the Commissioner gave of Mahatma Gandhi this morning. The future depends on what you do today. And we were talking about those young potential engineers in kindergarten. So I think that's a very appropriate thing to have in our minds. So for you, and I won't necessarily say the most important priority because I've heard from every panel today, it's about all these elements coming together, and it's very hard to say there's one thing we need to do. But in terms of as we leave this conference and go away, and a key next step, if we are to ensure the future of ATM research and innovation and make sure it's focusing on the right things, what for you is the key next step? Same question to each of you. You have a minute or so each.
So for me and also for Frequentis, the focus clearly is on the service delivery model. Yep. How to get more agile, how to get faster in implementing the service delivery model. That's the clear focus area for us.
Thank you. Tina?
Just ask yourself if you are ambitious enough not to be sorry afterwards. I think we all have to ask ourselves if what we are doing today will ensure competitiveness tomorrow. Will it keep us where we are, or is the trajectory of progress actually dropping? Because doing just something for the sake of doing or for the sake of finishing might not be worth it, and pivoting is not a bad thing to do in a case like that.
Which sort of also echoes what we talked about in the last panel when somebody said, we have to agree what success looks like. What's the benchmark? What is it we're trying to achieve? For you, using that competitiveness as the benchmark is key, Tina. Yes. Simon?
I think about it in two separate ways. One, I think we need to market ATM. And what I mean by that is people need to understand what air traffic is, and they don't. At all walks of life. It has to be less invisible than what it is, or else it's not going to get the attention it deserves. That's at a big level. I think then what we need to concentrate on is for me, I think of the 3 C's, and it's nothing clever. It's climate, it's capacity, and it's complexity. And those things, if we focus on the things that are really important, then I think we have a chance to succeed, whether that's integration with the complexity, whether that's investing in sustainability to address the climate problem. And then, the capacity side is all about data, and it's all about the data and the services that we need to provide. If we concentrate on those 3, then we have a chance of being successful.
Thank you very much. Tatiana, last word goes to you.
Thank you. I do believe all of the things that were said are important, but it's also we need to be quicker about all of this, about all of our innovation, and there is a lot of reasonable regulations that we need to follow, but we also need to be more pragmatic about something, never forgetting about safety and security. But we need to be faster, even in the research. We need to find also ways of how we are funding research projects that is going to make it more agile, and also, as Tina said, there's always risk involved in research, and if it's not risky, then you shouldn't probably be investing in it, then you should be doing it on your own. So we need to find ways of being faster and being more flexible.
And on that note, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed for another fabulous discussion. Thank you very much indeed.